Welcome back to another video. My name is Bo. I am a used car technician. I basically refurbish used cars to be sold on the front lot, as we say. But here in Texas, it's getting close to 100 degrees lately. The importance of having a functioning AC system is more and more important the hotter it gets. So basically, I was going to try and make a video helping anybody having issues with the AC systems. Because reconditioning used cars, I see a lot of the same issues come up over and over again, and I kind of have like this system of things that I look for when trying to figure out what's wrong or why the AC system is not working the way it should be. So I'm going to show you some ways to kind of diagnose that does not involve having AC gauges or checking the Freon levels. These are just some things you can look at just at home in a garage and driveway. Things you can kind of, depending on the symptoms or combination of symptoms, you can kind of determine what is wrong with the AC. But here we go. So this Lexus GS300 is gonna be a little test vehicle. So you get in your car, you turn the AC, and it's not cold. The first thing you want to do is let the car warm up, let it get to operating temp with the AC full blast. And once it does that, fill the AC. If it is actually hot, not ambient temperature, not the temperature of like the stagnant air around you, but if it's actually hot, it could just be a blend door actuator. There's these little motors in the dash that control doors, and they direct the airflow in the HVAC box from, you know, hot, cold air. They can direct the airflow top, bottom, you know, defrost out the floor. So if it's actually hot air, it could just be a temperature door actuator that is stuck. But now if it's ambient temperature, just, you know, the temperature of the air around you, that means that it's probably not a blend door actuator, because it's actually, the door is the position it should be, it's just not cooling the air. So that's one thing to look for. Now if you notice that it's cooler on one side than it is the other, for whatever reason, I'm not exactly sure myself. Whenever your vehicle is a little bit low on Freon, it'll be colder towards the driver's side. And you know what, I have seen in some cases where it's actually colder on the passenger side. So like, for example, if you come over here and it feels nice and cold, but over here it's not as cold, your vehicle could just be low on Freon. So yeah, you might have a small leak. You could probably charge it up, maybe put some sort of refrigerant sealant in there and get away with that. Now, here's one more thing you can test for without even getting out of the vehicle. If your AC is not working properly when the car is just idling with the RPMs low like this, before you even get out and start looking under the hood, go ahead and just rev it up to about, I don't know, 2,000 RPMs. And if you notice then that the AC starts to cool down, and you notice a difference in temperature, that is a very good indication that your AC compressor is going out. Because basically the compressor is just a giant pump. And it's kind of strange the way compressor works, because it pumps the refrigerant through the system, but it also sucks the refrigerant through the system. So basically it needs compression. It needs to be able to pump and suck the refrigerant through the system, and if it's not doing that properly, it's not going to do it at a lower RPM, but kind of revving it up will kind of compensate for that bad compressor and let the temperatures drop back down. It'll circulate the Freon the way it's supposed to. That's just one thing to look for if your AC is not working correctly. On to the next thing. All right, now we're looking under the hood, and this is kind of one thing you can do to verify that you might have a bad temperature door actuator. You can come over to the low side AC line, which is going to be the larger of the two lines. And be careful not to touch the high side, because the high side is high pressure, it's really hot. But the low side, if working correctly, should be cold and should have condensation built up on the outside. So you can come in here and fill the low side AC line, which is going to be the larger diameter line right there, and it's nice and cold to the touch. That means that the compressor is engaged, it is circulating Freon through the system. The evaporator should be nice and cold, so the air going through the evaporator should, you know, be cold coming out of the vents. And if it's not, that's another indication that maybe you have a bad temperature door actuator. So the next easiest thing to look for under the hood is just look at the compressor and see if the clutch is engaged. When the compressor is engaged, the center portion of the compressor pulley actually spins the same speed as the pulley itself. When it's not engaged, it does not spin. So in this case, it's engaged. Let me go ahead and turn off the AC. Show you what it looks like when it's not engaged. AC off. Now the center section of that lower AC compressor pulley is not spinning. So there's a couple reasons why your compressor wouldn't engage. So you've got low and high side pressure switches. It will not engage if the low side pressure is at a certain point, and it will be disengaged if the high side pressure isn't in the correct range. Basically, it won't engage if there's enough Freon, and it will disengage if there's too much Freon or if the pressures are too high. And the only reason that the pressure would be too high is if, you know, say you have you could have a condenser fan not working, could not be cooling the condenser good enough, so the pressures get too high, too hot, and it'll disengage because it exceeds the you know, safe pressure range of the system. Or you could have a blockage, like this happens in a lot of the used cars I see. Like if there was an AC compressor that went out, sometimes it sends debris into the system. It can clog up the condenser and orifice tube. If there's a clog or a restriction, your high side pressure can skyrocket way up, system will get hot, and it'll shut off the compressor. So basically, your system has to be in this safe range for the compressor to be engaged. It's almost like a safety shut off. Also, if you have too much Freon, there's like this dump valve on the back of the compressor that will release the Freon. I've accidentally discovered that in the past. So I did mention how there's a condenser fan, and if your condenser fan is not working, your AC will not work when you're at a standstill. It's real easy. There's usually one fan dedicated for when the AC is engaged. You can just check to see if both of your fans are spinning when the AC is on. Go ahead and turn the AC off and see if one of them shuts off. But if your fan is faulty, then your AC would probably only work while you're driving it up to speed, getting airflow through the grill. But when you come to a standstill, your AC would probably not work very well at all. That's really easy to check for. Like I said, just AC off and on, make sure your fan's spinning. And let's see, if you're having any sort of leaks, if you're having to top off your Freon pretty often, a lot of your like AutoZone, Walmart cans of Freon come with hoses with a low side pressure gauge, and that works pretty good to get the system topped off and filled up, but you can't see the high side, and you're not going to be able to see, like if you have a clog in the system. Like I said before, reasons that the high side would shoot up and cause you know, excessive pressure, you just get an idea of what the low side is. It works most of the time, but sometimes you do need to know what the high side pressure is. But the most common places for leaks are going to be the condenser, because debris can go through the front of the bumper, through the grill, and hit the condenser, causing leaks, and it'll just look like a wet spot. It'll look like a corner. Usually it's in the corners. It'll be like the bottom left corner, bottom right corner, but it'll just look like a big wet spot. Or if you have AC dye in the system, you can get a black light, and the dye, the leak detection dye, will actually glow green. Besides that, check your connections, like right here where the lines go into the condenser. Any places where there's like you know, pipe to rubber, the connections to the evaporator. If you can't see any obvious leaks, if you have like a black light and you can't find any leak detection dye, then it's likely that your evaporator is leaking, and the evaporator is located in the dash. That's usually a pain in the butt to replace, and a lot of people are actually too scared to even tackle that job. But what you can do to verify a leak in the evaporator is get one of those black lights that let the leak detection dye glow green, and look at the drain coming out of the evaporator, because all the evaporators have this drain that drip the condensation onto the floor. And what will happen is that dye will actually mix in with that condensation and come out of the tube. So if you're lucky, you can catch some of that dye in that drain. That'll be a good way to verify that your evaporator is no good. But yeah, it's actually getting pretty hot. I think I'm gonna wrap up this video, but that's just a couple quick things to look for if AC isn't working correctly. One more I might as well throw out there. If you know your Freon levels are good, you know everything should be working properly, your AC compressor is not engaging, most cars actually have a fuse and a relay for the AC compressor. So a lot of old school techs, what they do is to verify that a compressor is actually good, is you can jump the AC relay and that'll engage the compressor clutch, or you can jump the low side pressure switch, that'll engage the compressor clutch. Because the compressor could go out, as I explained, how you have to rev it up to kind of compensate for the lack of compression the compressor is creating, but the clutch also goes out because it's an electrical component that can fail on its own. It's like a magnetic clutch that has to get 12 volts in order to engage and spin the compressor pulley. So it could fail internally, but also it could fail electronically in that sense. So yeah, check your fuses, check your relays, check everything I just kind of mentioned. Those are just some quick things. You can literally check everything I just told you in a couple minutes, and hopefully you can get an idea of why your AC system is not working. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.